Welcome to Web Lecture 2.4. We're going to continue talking about the Constitution, and today we're going to focus on the executive branch. Now, as we were discussing when we were talking about the different articles of the Constitution, you may realize that Article 2 is what talks about the executive branch. So let's take a look at the executive branch. When we're talking about the executive branch, mostly we're talking about the presidency. Now, when we think about the presidency, we may think about George Washington as our first president. And when we're thinking about presidents, we need to think about who is it that can become the president of the United States. And there are certain outlines that need to be established, or certain ideas, certain requirements to be president. The first two requirements or qualifications are that you must be a natural born citizen. So in the United States, if you are born in the United States, then you can be the president. If you are born outside of the United States and then become a legal resident or a citizen by naturalization, you cannot be president, only if you are born here in the United States. Another qualification is that you must be 35 years old. So in order to be president, you have to reach a certain age. Now, to be president, or once you are president, you have a term of office. That term of office is 4 years. Now, that 4-year term is not to exceed 2 terms, so you can only be president for 2 terms. They do not have to be consecutive terms, but you can only have 2 terms. Now, there is a possibility for you to be in office for more than 8 years, which is the 2-term limit. If you are vice president and the president dies after serving more than half of his or her term, then you can finish the remainder of that term, which would be up to a year and 11 months, and then run again, become president for a full 4-year term, and then run for a second term, which would be another 4 years. So technically you can be president for up to about 9 years and 8 months, or excuse me, 9 years and 11 months. But that is the extent that you can be president. Now, of all the presidencies, we have had 44 presidencies, and in fact, the odd thing about that is that we've had only 43 men in that office. That does not mean that there was a woman as the president. What that means is that Grover Cleveland, who was president twice, served 2 non-consecutive terms. So he was president, then he lost the presidency, then he was president again after another 4-year term. So that's just an odd little tidbit there. Now, a little bit of presidential history here. We're going to talk about different presidents that have died in office. The first one to die in office was William Henry Harrison. He actually only served for 31 days and died from pneumonia. He was such a man of the people that he stood out during his inauguration, and he shook hands very, very late into the night, and it was cold and damp, and he got pneumonia at his inauguration, and it didn't go away, and he only served as president for 31 days, all the time having pneumonia. Zachary Taylor died in office in 1850 of natural causes. But Abraham Lincoln was not so lucky to die of natural causes, and you probably all know this story. He was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth shortly after the end of the Civil War. James Garfield also assassinated in 1881. William McKinley did not directly die as a result of a shooting, but the gunshot wounds did kill him eventually after several days. But he was also shot, and he was shot by an anarchist who was trying to overthrow the government. Warren G. Harding also died in office. He died of a heart attack in 1923. Franklin Delano Roosevelt died, and he died actually before they instituted the 2-term policy. He died while he was serving his 3rd term in 1945. And then, as you probably know, John F. Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald in 1963. So just a little bit of presidential history. Now, the presidency is broken up into different terms, but also different jobs. Now, before we get to that, though, we want to look at what happens if the president cannot complete his or her term of office. And usually what happens is, as long as the vice president is in good standing and is healthy, then the vice president will take the office. Now, there is a succession of different people that will fall into line if the vice president is unable. After the vice president would be the the Speaker of the House of Representatives. After that is the President pro tempore of the Senate. Then you get the Secretary of State, then Secretary of Defense, and it goes on the line, down the line through the cabinet to take up the presidency if the people above him or her cannot fit into that position. Now, to be removed from office, the president can be what's called impeached. Now, in order to be impeached, the president has to not only be brought up on charges of impeachment by the House of Representatives, but then has to be convicted in a trial of Senate. And that is if the president is seen to have done something either against the United States or against the Constitution. So if the president does something illegal, those are grounds for impeachment. Now, the first job we're going to talk about of the president is that of chief executive. Now, as we talk about these different jobs, keep in mind that there are 7 different jobs of the president. Now, as chief executive, one of the main jobs of the president is to appoint his cabinet. The cabinet has 15 secretaries, and these are people that advise the president based on different topics, and so there are different departments. So the Secretary of State deals with foreign affairs, the Secretary of Defense deals with, obviously, defense and the military. There is the Secretary of Agriculture, the Secretary of Commerce. These are all people that are experts in these fields so that they can help to advise the president. And as chief executive, the president can also execute executive orders. So this is an order upheld by the president that is basically to execute a pre-existing law. So for example, President Abraham Lincoln gave the executive order of the Emancipation Proclamation. Even though the South was not part of the Union, he still emancipated all the slaves, and that was sort of a way to tell the South that the focus of the Civil War now was on freeing the slaves. And the Homeland Security Department, adding that to the cabinet, that would be another executive order that the president made. That was George W. Bush who made that executive order. The next job we're going to talk about is that of Commander-in-Chief. Now, Commander-in-Chief is the job of the president where he commands the U.S. Armed Forces. This does not, however, give him the ability to declare war. That ability rests with the Congress. They must approve the declaration of war. Now, with the president, the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff make the military decisions, but ultimately it is the president's decision to determine what to do or where to deploy the military. The third job that we're talking about for the president is that of head of state. This is basically the symbolic position of the president. Now, if we had a monarchy in the United States, the head of state would be the job of the king or the queen. As head of state, he promotes U.S. agendas, he makes fancy speeches, he represents the United States at special events and ceremonies, and he can make pardons. So that is to grant immunity to somebody that's committed a crime against the United States. Now, so you've seen, no doubt, the president doing these head of state type duties. So if the president throws out the first pitch of the baseball season or at the World Series, or if the president does some sort of symbolic gesture, that is the president doing his job as head of state. The next job is the president as chief diplomat. Now, this is where the president talks to people from foreign countries. Different foreign policy issues, directing the actions of American diplomats. This is signing treaties, creating trade agreements, doing anything that involves foreign leaders. This is the president as chief diplomat. Next is the president as chief legislator. Now, obviously we know the president cannot make laws, but the president can suggest the laws that he would like the Congress to act on. So each year the president gives what's called the State of the Union Address, and this is where the president gives his policy agenda, so what he thinks needs to be done for the following year. And so this usually includes some sort of legislative items that he would like to see Congress move forward on. Now, another thing that he does as chief legislator is lobby Congress, so gets out there, talks to people in Congress, tries to get them to approve or move forward on different acts or ideas that the president has. So right now, the president is really pushing a jobs bill to get people back to work, to tax people that are making over $1 million, to kind of stimulate the economy and get people back to work. So that would be an effort that he's making in order to lobby Congress as chief legislator. And as chief legislator, the president also has the power to veto. So if there is a bill that Congress passes that he does not like, he can strike down that bill or reject that bill. Now, the issue here is that Congress then has the ability to override his veto, but this is pretty difficult because they have to have a 2/3 vote in order to do that. The next job of the president is that of party leader. Now, when I say party leader, I don't mean that this is the guy that goes and gets the keg for the weekend. I mean, this is the person that leads the political party. So the president, as party leader, basically gets out there, gives speeches, but particularly speeches to help his or her party get into other offices. So if Anthony Fox, when he runs for the position of mayor for Charlotte again, if he's able to pull some strings, he may be able to get Barack Obama here to campaign for him. But he makes campaign speeches, heads up fundraising for parties, and if the president comes and gives a speech, that can command a certain amount of money for people to just come see that, and that money then goes to the Democratic Party in the case of President Barack Obama. Now, the last job of the president is that of economic leader. Now, really, the president doesn't have a whole lot of sway over the economy. Now, obviously, the president pushing this jobs bill, in that case, he thinks he may be able to move the economy in a positive direction. But for the most part, what the president gets as far as economic issues go is either credit if the economy is doing well, or blame if the economy is doing badly. Now, obviously, right now, the economy is not doing so well and really has not improved that much since Barack Obama has been in office. So right now, the president is getting a lot of blame for what is happening with the economy. Now, there are different